Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's always good to chat with you. Even better when we get to do it in person.
I know, we don't often get to do that.
Yeah, so especially with your busy agenda, you're in Parliament yesterday, which we'll talk about in a minute. You speak to a lot of CEOs, you speak to a lot of investors and just everyone in between. So today's conversation is going to be about corporate governance, a bit about your background, the role of the ASA now and into the future. But Rachel, one of the things I like to do is talk about or offer my guests the opportunity to do some icebreakers. So if you're game, I've got 3.
Ready to go.
Okay, the first one is, who is the best finance presenter you have seen?
Oh, I would have to say Michael Kemp, who has the Ulysses Contract, is that book?
Yeah.
He's fantastic. He's actually an ASA education partner as well, but just fascinating as far as breaking down myths of investing in a very interesting way.
Yeah. Mike is a true treasure. He is indeed. He's been on the show a few times and he was at the ASA Sydney event 2 years ago and I think he was the final speaker and knocked the socks off everyone.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Very much a TEDx-style presenter, and he'll be at our next conference in May 2025.
Oh, great. Cool. Okay. Second one, what's the one investment you got totally wrong?
Okay, so I invested in a pharmaceutical-based company and made a big mistake and was very passionate, listened to someone else that I thought was very good, and they are very good, but they were passionate about it, and lost a lot of money. And not only did I put in the initial capital, but put in more over time. So making the decision to walk away was a hard decision. I think that's one of the hardest things for an investor. But it came to me after speaking to one of our members in Adelaide, and we were talking about when to let go. And that was my revelation that I needed to let go. And it was a good decision because I could use that money for something else. There still was money there, which is not always the case, but put it into another investment. Yeah,
but that's good. And thanks for the humility. The third icebreaker is, what's one thing that you'll teach your children that few other parents would?
Okay, so we do all the boring things with children, but what I try to teach them is to think about the companies they want to invest in based on their knowledge level and really getting that passion. So you need passion, but you also need to be able to look at the numbers. So that's what I'm trying to encourage them to do at this point in time as teenagers, to think about different companies and what they would like to invest in.
Speaking of, so that's the end. That's the well done. That's the finish line for the icebreakers. We're going to talk a little bit about your story, but you said in a text message to me a little bit about your parents, and I was curious to know if they had taught you anything about business, finance, investing, any of these types of topics when you were younger.
Yeah, they were teachers. So when I come across people that have teachers as parents, I think they instill in you a passion for learning. And so they were very good at saving money, and they didn't put it into equities, but they did put it into their house and they made really sound decisions. So I had good guidance as far as parents that were thoughtful and really got you to think. And then they were very interested in the news. So as a family, we would sit around watching the news every night and discussing the topics and what does that mean. And so just really interested in news, investing, came from a very young age.
Seems like a positive association with news too. Like, what does it mean? Like, what is the implication of this? It's kind of, it invites you to be more curious.
That's what's really important. That's what I try to instill in our children, is to think through things. Well, what does that mean? Could you hear a different story if you turned on a different channel or read the newspaper versus the TV versus the radio? So it's really important to think through. The same as investing is, don't just listen to the story and believe in it. You need to be curious, ask the right questions, and then make sure that you feel comfortable with that outcome, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great. So I've been very privileged to work with you and the team at the ASA for a long time on this podcast and on other things that we've done over the years. And I realize, like, we've never done this per se in person, I don't think, you may have told me, but I'm still not sure how you came to personally be involved with the ASA.
So where I started in financial services, and then I went into associations. I worked at AICD and also Governance Institute, and had a real passion for associations, but also governance. So did every course that I could possibly do in those organisations while I was there. And then I did see the role at ASA and I applied and I thought, not going to get it, never been a CEO before, and went through the application process and I did get it. And so I've known of ASA for a very long time, being in governance circles. The organisation's been over 60 years. I haven't been around 60 years, but I've definitely known them for at least 10 years. And they do a lot for investors. So they represent them at AGMs, provide education and advocate. And I think that is a really worthy purpose as far as an organisation. And so therefore, I was really interested in it and it's been fabulous and it's been 3.5 years.
Yeah, wow. That's it seems like it's gone very quickly, at least from my perspective. And under your leadership, the ASA has made a lot of change, a lot of positive change in my opinion. So you alluded to it there, the role that the ASA plays. And we have had Stephen on the show before. We've had Fiona on the show before and plenty of other advocates for the ASA. But in your own words, what is the ASA's role? As we sit here and record this in 2024, how would you define the role of the ASA?
I would say it's around helping investors, retail investors, and it's advocating for them and providing training opportunities. And that's what it is right now. And we're looking at different ways that we can increase what we do based on how people change their investing processes.
Because that's one of the questions that I have for you in just a moment around the role of like passive investing, ETFs, that type of thing. But you were at Parliament House yesterday. I think that might be a good illustration of the role that you do outside of just working with members and working with companies. Can you tell us what you were doing there?
Yeah, sure. It's the last week. It was the last week of Parliament, so a lot going on there. What we were doing was advocating against some superannuation reform that we feel won't treat investors well, and that is particularly taxing of unrealised gains. And we do have concerns and our members have concerns. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is representing your members, listening to them, seeing what the legislation is and trying to influence it. So we're hopeful that it's not going through in 2024 and we hope that that will continue into next year and then there'll be an election and we see what happens.
Yeah, interesting. So it's kind of like, I'm curious about this, Rachel. How does something like that, which has been proposed, how does that then make its way to your desk and you think this is something that we need to take a stance on? Like, how do you decide that that's the thing that we should pursue and this is our stance on it?
So there's two ways that we decide on what issues. One is we look at the policy priorities every year and we get input from members. So we go out to them, we send a survey and say, what should we be focused on? And then we come up with the 3 or 4 things and we publish that and we tell all of our members, we tell the regulators and the government what we're focused on. But then issues come up throughout the year. So what is really helpful is when our members send us an email, give us a call and they say there's this issue. So sometimes when you hear it once, you think, well, that's interesting. But when you get a lot of feedback, then you start to go, this is an issue that we need to advocate on behalf of retail shareholders. And they also help us with our submissions. So when we talk about submissions, that's to regulators and it's advocating on behalf of retail shareholders and what they want. Ultimately, what retail shareholders want is they want opportunity to investments. And what do regulators want? They often want to protect them. So it's a balancing act there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we see that with all the recent rules and proposals around things like defining wholesale sophisticated investors and what the implications, both good and bad, of making change there. One of the things Stephen and I spoke about when we caught up last was the idea that you can give the ASA your vote if you're not actively involved in the corporate governance issues that affect your companies, whether it's Woolies or some mid-cap company or something that's followed by the ASA. How does someone practically, listening to this, say, well, I'll let the ASA vote on my behalf?
Yeah, what you do is you can put in, it's called a standing proxy, which is filling out a form to the registry and saying that you want to give your proxy, which is your vote, to Australian Shareholders Association. That makes us stronger as an organisation representing all retail shareholders, because there's 7.7 million retail shareholders in Australia. Or if you get the online forms, what you can do is you can go into the portal for your company and you can vote and you can give your proxy to us. I really encourage people to do it because it may seem time consuming, but it does make a difference. It gives us an opportunity to go and speak to the chairs of these companies and represent all retail shareholders and make a difference in society.
So if I was to do this, say I own 10 different companies. Do I have to do it 10 different times, or can I go into the share registry? Like how does it work like that?
Yeah, so you can either go straight into the registry and do it there and give your standing proxy, or you can fill out a form and then that would be for each registry. So each company covered under that registry.
Okay. So if 5 of them were with Computershare,
yep.
I do it once for Computershare and it covers the
That's
5.
right. And that's what I did. So I did it all at the one time. And if you do like paper and you do like filling it out that way, then maybe just do it once a year. And it doesn't matter. You don't need to remember what did I put down last time. You can list everything you own at that point and it will get covered off.
Okay. That's pretty straightforward then. Now, one of the questions I put to Lawrence Cunningham, Professor Lawrence Cunningham, last year, and we're talking about these governance issues, not just here in Australia, of course, but overseas, was the rise of passive investing, which I might, for the purposes of this conversation, define as not just index investing, but also just ETFs more generally, active ETFs, like basically where there's an intermediary between you and the company. How do you think that is currently impacting corporate governance in Australia, and how could that change going forward?
I think the challenge there is because there's so much now in exchange-traded funds, those individuals aren't voting and you're not really aware of the intermediary and how they're going to vote and place what effectively is your ownership to a perspective. So I think there is space there for it to change. And I would like to see ETFs that they give an opportunity for those that own them to have their say and then find the collective view. I think that could make a really big difference. And it sends a message to companies as well, rather than having an ETF and not knowing what's happening with that company and where your vote effectively is going.
Yeah, because even if you are in an ETF for something, you still care about, if there's some shenanigans going on at one company, as we've seen in the news over the last 6 months, you probably want to be able to exercise some discretion. And particularly as your wealth builds in these types of investments, it probably becomes more important, not less important as time goes on. And so I feel like that's a really interesting thing. I know, I don't know if you know him, but Tobias Carlisle, he runs a podcast in the United States called Value After Hours. And he's a huge advocate for this and trying to get more people involved, even if they use ETFs or index funds or whatever the case may be, because we know that they're kind of swallowing up a lot more investor dollars as time goes on.
Yeah, I think looking to America is where we should head. There's that conversation is more active in America around ETFs and voting and what's happening. And I'd really like to see that happen here. And it is something that we're talking about at ASA and our focus.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of, so a lot of our members are ASA members and familiar with the organisation right now, but there was an amalgamation between the ASA and the AIA recently. You run events around the country. There's virtual things. There's in-person events, of course. How, if at all, do you see what the ASA represents today changing over the next few years? Okay,
so at our core, one of the key things is that we have about 200 volunteers, and that makes a big difference to what we can do, the profile of the organisation. So what we want to do is keep that part that's unique, does very well, and we love our volunteers. So we want to be able to continue that, and they help with member meetings, they help with monitoring. But we're starting to look at how can technology support our organisation? How can AI help us with our company monitoring to be more efficient and be able to monitor more companies? So that's where I think we can make a bigger difference in business and in Australia. And then what we're trying to do as well is have more access to CEOs and chairs speaking directly to retail shareholders. And that's through additional events. So we've got some events called ASA Engage, where you hear directly from a chair or a CEO. And we're looking to have not only our Sydney and Melbourne once a year event, but go to Queensland too. So really it's a bit about increasing everything, but also looking at technology and holding the core of what we do really well, our volunteers there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I feel like that's a worthy frontier for you guys, because like the ability to say 120-page annual report to say, all right, analyze this, AI, and then match it against our criteria and our legacy, our history, our track record of monitoring for this, and this, and tell me what you find. And it just saves monitors time. It allows for more efficient discussion points and those types of things.
Yeah, it's going to make a difference from using AI for facts, building it around our guidelines, but understanding that creativity and the view of a retail shareholder at this point in time is not AI,
Absolutely.
Is the brain. And we need those brains working really well, helping other retail shareholders. So it's around retail shareholders helping each other, and that's how we make a difference. And just through my traveling around, I come across people that are looking to retire, and they're often interested in how can they give back. And so monitoring is a really good way of being involved, learning more around investing, learning a bit more about yourself, and being able to stand up and speak at an AGM. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. Someone else will do it for you, and you can do the report writing and give your views.
Because it can be quite intimidating to rock up at an AGM and you see all the people sitting up the front in their nice suits and dozens, if not hundreds of people in the room. It can be quite intimidating. So the ability to still go along, participate, but maybe have advocates on your behalf is a really important thing. I also like your point about the AI wouldn't replace anything. It would just aid the monitor. Speaking of volunteers, something that Steve Mabb, chair of the ASA, told me about when he got involved in the ASA, because he was investing through his self-wealth account and he was learning about companies, and he was really involved because he was a business person in a former life. Kind of still is, I guess. But he was saying, like, he monitors companies like Collins Foods, which, as fate would have it, Mike Kemp is actually a pretty meaningful shareholder in, actually.
Yep.
So, he had that exposure through volunteering and doing that type of thing. If someone's listening to this and they're really passionate about 3 or 4 companies that they own, how does someone become a volunteer?
Okay, so they contact the office. You can find our details on the website and just tell us what you're interested in. We do have programs where we buddy you up with someone, so you don't have to go straight from nothing to standing up at an AGM. Like, I've helped monitor as well and been a buddy and had someone next to me and telling me what to do. So there's ways where we can all help each other. But often we have people that have had a professional career and they really want to keep their mind active. And it's a great way to do that, but really learn more around investing and dig deep into a company, whether you own it or not. We do have volunteers that monitor companies they don't own, and they feel comfortable with that as well.
I guess one of the benefits that would come, and if you already do own shares though, is that you get exposure to management. You're interested in this stuff anyway, so you may as well kind of leverage that and hopefully get some access and answers to questions that you might have as an everyday shareholder that you can relate to everyone else. I've only got a couple more questions, but one of the questions is something that you've said, which is that your role is leadership. You're on the tally. You even come down to our level here on the podcast every now and again. But you're 1 minute you're in Canberra, next minute you're talking about something to do with some scandal or something positive, right? You said that you kind of take pride in being a purpose-led leader, and I'm kind of really interested in what exactly that means.
Yeah, so for me, it's around being a collaborator with a team. So showing leadership, and I'm thinking about my team here is collaborating, helping, working towards a purpose and a vision. And being in the not-for-profit world, it's around making sure you've got a financially sustainable business, but you're hitting purpose-led goals. So for us, it's around that education. It's around protecting retail shareholders. that's what gets me really interested in what I do. And yeah, it's that balancing act, as you said, like, one day you could be Parliament, one day you could be data cleansing, the next moment you might be on the ABC talking. You just have to be really mindful also with your time. So, because it's a big job, so that you can really focus in with a laser focus on whatever it is that you're about to do. So I do, in preparing for some of those things, I do watch a lot of AGMs and just across what's happening at all points, and just constantly thinking around governance. What does modern governance look like? And that's around, doing the right thing often, and ethics.
Yeah, indeed. I like the clarification, because I think most people would say that they want to be, a purpose-focused leader or something, but it's kind of that going to the grassroots and be like, well, why do we exist? Let's everything that we do, whether we're on the ABC or whether we're on the train to Canberra, you're remembering that's kind of the vision, and the team unites underneath that, which is great.
Yeah, we recently did a staff survey which showed that we're very much in those upper percentiles around mission and purpose. And as a team, we reflected on that this week to talk about the why, and they talked about how they really like not being in a silo and helping each other. So there's that real ethos, I guess, in a not-for-profit world of helping each other. And, the balancing act, though, is you can't help everyone. So there's a certain amount of time in the week, but we really do want to help and lift governance and lift the performance of companies for investors.
For sure. I'm going to put some links in the show notes for people to become a member, but also to get in contact with your team if they're interested in becoming a monitor or buddying up with someone and learning and getting access to these companies. There's also resources on how people can get involved in meetings and that sort of a thing as well. The final question that I always ask on the show, Rachel, is a question that's more philosophical. If you could go back in time and tell yourself, your younger self, one thing about investing, finance, business life, even just anything, like what's one thing that you would tell younger Rachel?
I would have put more into my investments when I was younger. So I have always been investing from 20 plus, but I would have put more in and got the benefits of compounding over time. So that's what I will always tell my children as they get older, is make sure you really save and invest from a young age, because then you can make mistakes and you don't lose too much at that point in time. And, if you start at 20 and you're consistently doing it and you finish work at 65, there you go. There's 45 years of compounding and saving and investing. I think that's really important, because people get really focused on what is the one thing they want then. Is that handbag or those shoes or that car really going to make a difference to your overall life and what you want to achieve?
I like it. It's a common answer, because time is one of the things we can't get back, and it's also one of those wonderful things that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So when it comes to investing, it's something, when there's something that rare, take advantage of it for sure. Well, Rachel, it's been a pleasure to catch up in person, and it's always a pleasure to catch up. I look forward to, hopefully it's not the next event, but I definitely will see you there. So on behalf of everyone at Rask, thank you.
Thank you, Owen.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.